Alright, don't ask me why, but I'm gonna try and make my case for why we need a Heroes of the Storm board game and what it can look for. So today we have lots of major companies from video games and comic books and movies taking their franchises and turning to board game form. And we can see this with Street Fighter, Dark Souls, Horizon Zero, um, Mega Man, and plenty of other franchises as well from the video games. And we have it from movies and the like. So in this case, Blizzard has done board games before, I believe. They've done it for Warcraft, I wasn't really aware of. And they have done it for StarCraft, which was a major 4X kind of gameplay. So I'm thinking, yes, technically, Heroes of the Storm has the mechanics for a proper board game, and I'm going to try and make my case today. So, what I've designed is that a proper map would look like this, for instance. Obviously, the spacing can be changed, but you have a grid by 3 by 5, and you would have two teams, obviously. One side, you have the core, and you have two towers from the bottom lane and top lane for each player. And we have mercenary camps, and we have an objective spawn point that comes straight at the middle of the map. So for starters, I haven't decided, but we could potentially have maybe 3 to 5 hero players for each player. I'm thinking more along the lines of four, but fundamentally a map would look like something like this, and it'd be very easy to have new kind of maps if we wanted to have a 3 laner, for instance. But this is a core basic map I've kind of see can be designed. So the goal is obviously a destroy your opponent's core before they destroy yours, and a lot of mechanics does exist from Heroes, but revamped into board games to make it more of a turn by turn based approach. So the first variable I'm going to pinpoint is time track. So every hero's turn moves a track by one. So first player A goes, then player B goes, and even when you switch between the players, the track will go. So if player one is first, and then you go to player two, you move to track two for then, and then for turn three, player one will go, and you go back and forth for each hero that's alive. Every 5 and 10 turns, minions will spawn at the core, and I'll go more in depth later about that. And while at turn 10, the objective would start to spawn. Now, after the objective, and it would keep respawning for other rounds at the 10th turn, except for cases when the current objective had ended up between turn 6 and 10, you wouldn't spawn it within that round. It would be too soon. So, but fundamentally, objectives will respawn, come back every few times when it can. The next aspect would be the experience track. So this determines when a player hero levels up, and as the hero levels up, they acquire new talents, and these talents can be used for upgrading your turns hero to make them more stronger as you would in a normal game. And there are a total of 5 levels, so 5 talent choices within each level you can pick, which I'll explain later. So when a minion is killed, it gives you an experience point. And you have to make sure that you have a hero within the same area as a minion to gain the experience. Um, and when an enemy Now for enemy heroes and towers, when you take those out, you gain 3 experience points each. And when you reach level 10, you will level up your heroes, all of them, as you would in a normal game. After level 5, if once there's no more talents to pick from, if you're a level ahead, your heroes will gain an extra action to use for their turns. Now, for a hero's turns, they can have 3 actions to use, and they can use any amount of actions for any combinations they like. So, for one action, they can move one adjacent space. For a second action, they can do a basic attack, or they can use their abilities of their characters. They can Hearthstone back to base for 2 actions, or they can reserve their actions and save the rest of their unused actions for later. And these unused actions you can use during your opponent's turn to either move your character, make a basic attack, or use an ability that has the term counter on it. Now, abilities may only be used once per turn, to say, and ultimates come back every other turn for a hero when they activate, fundamentally. Now, there are three basic hero roles. I won't go too in depth, but tanks are obviously, they have more health than the normal heroes. Supports have some sort of unique kit that helps the long-term goals of the player. And damage heroes have a unique attribute in which they get to do a critical hits for their basic attack. So they just basically roll a dice. If they roll a 5 or a 6, the basic attack deals an extra damage. Quite simple like that. Now the minions, as I said, spawn every turn 5 and 10, and when they spawn, they will be at the core, and they will be 3, so it'll be 6 minions spawning each time at the core for these turns. And they will move to the opposite direction to the opposing core, and they will move 1 space after each hero goes. Now, when they contact an enemy unit, they will, during the beginning of their activation, they will not move forward, but instead deal 1 damage in this priority order. They will deal damage first to other minions from the opposing team, then the highest health hero, then to the tower if they're in the tower space. So the next, this is how their movements would obviously occur, as they would in a normal game. Now towers have 10 health each. They will attack an enemy unit at its space at the end of its turn in this priority. First they will target minions, then they will attack the heroes within their space. So towers will deal 3 damage to the target if there is an enemy at the end of the turn, during any turn fundamentally. So you can go during your turn, and then if your opponent's turn again, the tower will do 3 damage at the end of its turn to whatever targets are in it. So when a player destroys a tower, it will give 3 XP points to that player, and from now on, an extra minion will spawn to that lane if they destroy the tower. So there will be 4 minions spawning instead of 3 minions spawning at turn 4, 5, or 10 for that player. The mercenary camps are quite simple as well. They can help push for a lane, and they are a little different. They don't attack you. I haven't decided, but they haven't attacked you if you're trying to capture them, but they each have 2 health. So there's a total of 2 mercenaries in each camp, so there'd be a total of 4 on the board at a time. And when a player captures and defeats the mercenaries, and if they're in the same space at the end of their turn with no enemy heroes there, meaning they can sneak in and try to steal the camps from you, you capture the Mercs. Now once you capture the Mercs, during the next turns, they will start to move to the direction of either to the lowest tower defense. I haven't decided if it should be highest, but they'll go to the tower defense and they will move 1 space forward each turn. Their stats are that they have 2 health, deal 1 damage each, and have a range of 1. And their priority of attacks remains the same as most priorities: minions, heroes, then towers. Mercenaries respawn to their camp on turn 10 of a round after being defeated, so there's less time constraints as there would be an objective. Now in this board game, I think that we need to have objectives too, so there are 2 different scenarios I have. And the first one I have here is somewhat inspired by the Nidus Worm. I had a vision that whichever player defeats the Nidus Worm, the worm will come up and eat the tower somewhat. But basically, the first player to deal 10 damage to the objective gets to deal that amount of damage to the highest health tower. And the damage spills over to the next target if it destroys 1 tower, or if there's no towers left. So I was somewhat inspired by Hanamoro for this case, or Black's Heart Bay. But the thing is, the damage can be reduced for the winning player based on the opposing players have done to the objective. So if you do 10 damage to it, but the opposing player has done 5 damage to it, the objective will only deal 5 damage to the tower defense. Now the second scenario I have is move the payload. and this is very simple as well. You move the payload to the opposite end of your side of the map to the end of your and you have to have no enemy heroes at your same space at the end of your turn. So, for instance, if you're a player to the right, you have to get to the left side payload. You have to move the payload to the left side, and there has to be no enemies at the end of your turn within this space to achieve the objective. Now, once succeeded, I haven't decided the stats, but for the next 5 turns, a player's minions will have 2 health each and deal 2 damage each to priority targets. So, this being said, if your minions activate nearly every turn at the end of every hero's turn, they can potentially do a lot of damage over time within these 5 turns. Now, the death timer is quite simple as well. The earlier the level, the more likely you're to come back faster. And so the higher the level, the more likely you're to come back later. So this is very simple. Level 1, you just have to wait. Any heroes 1 turn after, your hero will come back. But at level 5, you have to wait 5 turns for the hero to come back to the field. And it'll be at the core. And when they do come back, they only come back at the core and they cannot take actions until their next activation. Status effects go very quickly here. I have slows, so this will prevent the target from moving until next turn. So it would prevent. It's basically to counter the reaction tokens I would mention before. You know, your opposing players, if they have reaction tokens, they can move their characters away. Slows will prevent that. Stuns will remove an action token from a hero during their next activation. So instead of having 3 activations tokens to use, they can only use 2. Silence would prevent them from using any abilities until the end of their next activation. And splash damage is just dealing extra damage to another additional target. So here is one case of one hero. I have designed 10 of them. I will only go over a few of them, but I would take mostly heroes from franchises that we wouldn't see. So, for instance, I would have Toblerone. So he's a turret dealer kind of hero in Overwatch, but we will likely not see him in the real Heroes of the Storm game because we have already 2 turret heroes from Probius and Gaz. So Hammond is another fun idea I thought just to bring up. And my leveling system is very simple, just like the game. Every time you level up, you pick a talent. And so at level 1, you get to decide out of 3 talents which one you want to pick. And so for Hammond, he could pick his shields can be a 2 health barrier. His shields upon expiration can deal 2 damage to one target. Or if he's below half his health, he gains a free movement action. And just for quick his abilities, he can use a shield, and he can use it during his opponent's turn if you choose to reduce 1 HP from the damage. And the other one is the charge, which makes him move forward 1 space, I should mention, and it will deal 1 damage to the target. Over time, you can do different builds to build up Hammond to make him have a different playstyle during each game. So here's a case of example. I can give him 2 shields at level 1. I can make my charge heal for each friendly hero I pass by at level 2. I can choose the Minefield ultimate at level 3, and this would make 1 damage to enemy heroes, or mostly enemy heroes who enter the same space as Hammond until the beginning of his next turn when it disappears, the ultimate. Or I can choose the Cannonball ultimate, which deals 1 area damage. And for level 4, I could choose 3 consecutive basic attacks, give a free shield token to use. And the last one is shield token also applies to other heroes in the same space. But basically, I could have chosen other talents at different levels to create a different play style. So I could have chose a more damage-oriented one, which shields expiration deals damage instead and giving me extra health at the level 1. I could have chose a splash damage one for charge. I could have gained Cannonball deals 2 area damage, or I can go anywhere at any place in the map during my turn. So it'd be very quick from going from the core to the opponent's core very quickly. So you can have very fun ideas like this in board game form, and I feel like we can take heroes we wouldn't see and just make them make this would be like a miniature kind of game I was thinking about. So I'll go over quickly. Reiner is very easy too. He'd be a damage oriented hero. He has adrenaline that heals for 1. Penetrating shots can deal 3 damage to a target, and he can go for different builds which strengthen his basic attacks, for instance, at level 1 or level 2. His ultimate would give him extra ones too as well if he chose it. So there are different strategies you can kind of go with, and everyone has a different play style. And because it's so easy to produce heroes in this kind of form, we can have potentially a lot of heroes in this kind of game, and it's very easy to have expansions for something like this in board game form. So there is a lot of potential in this regard. We can have, and one other fun idea I had is have a Diablo townsfolk. So they're somewhat a little bit like the Lost Vikings, but this time you can have a they're somewhat actually inspired by the Lost Vikings, but I feel like we need to have these kind of guys. The peasant is like a support kind of guy who supports the soldier who goes around dealing damage to heroes, and they're very good at lane clearing. So, for instance, um, they can just synergize with each other if they wanted to. They're just a unique play style at the end of the day. So I thought it'd be very neat to kind of have this as well. We can have a High Templar or a reworked Tassadar for those who will never see him one day get a real rework. But jokes aside, he can provide shields that protects the other heroes. He can use mind control that makes an enemy hero take control of their actions and just use their abilities on their own enemies. So you can have really crazy ideas, and it's kind of low risk because it doesn't really mess with the meta, because you can just get creative in this kind of aspects of what a hero can be. And the last one I'll show you here today is the Cow King. So I don't think we'll ever see him. I wish we would see him in the real game, but I imagine a DPS cow who gets stronger with lower health and who can summon a other cow to help him within his own area space and deal area damage to his opponent. So, for instance, at level 5, um, he can silence with Cow Moo, and he can deal 3 damage to a target who's above half his health. So he can be a very strong damage dealer there. Or he can buff his cow summons, give him additional health. Um, that deals splash damage, that can absorb damage if you wanted to from opponents' attacks, or you can deal extra damage at an extra range and become very savagery at the end of the day. I should nerf this one, but this is just an idea of how a Cow King could be in this game, or other Dream Heroes can be in this game if we wanted to choose it. So, final thoughts. Yes, I think it's possible to have a board game version of this. I've seen MOBA board games before, but haven't seen anything like this kind of, which we can have heroes pick their own talents. And this is very simple. This is actually, in board game terms, this is very simple. There isn't a lot of variables I've pinpointed today. And fundamentally, you can add heroes with expansions. You can start with 10 heroes base set, change the combinations. You can just play around with ideas. The core set can come up with 2 objectives, but you can obviously create other expansions which come up with more objectives in different scenarios. You can have different maps, 3 lanes if I wanted to. 3 lanes is a little tricky because it make the map much bigger, but everything's possible. I just have to play around with ideas. And fundamentally, I think Blizzard should go do a board game with this, or they can take some. It's not really big investments, and I'm gonna really emphasize that. It only takes about 12 people maybe to actually produce a game, or like make the art components, to do the game design, and just do the playtesting. Finding playtesters is something else, but this is not that complicated to make a board game, and I really feel like they can actually go in this direction if they choose to. So I kind of wish they would go in that approach, but maybe you guys can, in the meanwhile, give me advice, help promote, just keep dreaming at least, and we can potentially get this going one day. But fundamentally, I can take this game and build something out of it from the scratch and take any redesign. If I want to take horror theme or fantasy theme or whatever kind of theme, I could. But fundamentally, this is a Heroes of the Storm inspired game, and I would like to see it turn to something if it could one day. But obviously, we'll see how that goes. So, in any event, leave me comments, give me advices. I'd love to hear from you guys if you can. Thanks.